One day, Frank woke up and realized his wife wasn't looking at him anymore. Not in anger, not in resentment, just not at all. She still made his coffee, still texted him grocery lists, still said, "Love you," at bedtime. But her eyes, they'd stopped searching his face a long time ago. And that hit harder than any argument ever could, because Frank hadn't cheated. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't walked away. He stayed. He showed up. He did everything a good husband is supposed to do. And yet, somewhere along the way, he became invisible to the woman he still loved. He asked her what she needed. He let her pick the movies, the meals, the weekend plans. He avoided conflict, chose peace, softened his edges. And that's exactly when she stopped leaning in. So what happened? Here's the truth most men never hear. You didn't lose your attraction. You just lost your edge. You didn't stop being lovable. You started playing a role that doesn't spark desire. Not bad, just forgettable. But here's the good news. You don't need to change who you are. You just need to stop playing the version of you that makes her feel nothing. Because deep down, she doesn't want a nice guy. She wants a man she can feel. And Frank? He was about to remember what that man used to feel like. Frank was 64, retired firefighter, married 37 years. He used to be the rock, the guy people called when things went wrong. Flooded basement? Car broke down on the highway? Family argument on Christmas Eve? Frank showed up. He always had a plan. He always knew what to do. He wasn't loud, just solid, decisive, grounded. He didn't talk too much, but when he did, people listened, including Linda. She used to light up when he walked into the room, used to laugh at his dry jokes, used to lean into him like he was home. Now, he spent his days in quiet routines, fixing things that didn't need fixing, reorganizing the shed for the third time that month, making dinner before she got home, pasta, salmon, chicken piccata, her favorites. He swept the backyard every morning, folded laundry with precision, and still warmed up her car on cold days without being asked. He thought that would be enough. But lately, Linda had grown distant, not angry, not cold, just quiet, unreachable somehow. She still thanked him, still kissed his cheek before bed, still brought home his favorite cookies from the store, but something had shifted, and Frank felt it in the silence between them. He started noticing the little things. She no longer laughed when he teased her, no longer touched his arm when they watched a movie, no longer looked back when he walked into the room. One night, the moment landed. It was a Friday. Dinner was chicken stew, the kind her mom used to make. He'd followed the recipe exactly, even found the same red wine she liked in her 20s. They sat down to eat. Frank lit a candle, something she always appreciated. He poured her a glass of wine. They ate in near silence. Halfway through the meal, he cleared his throat. "Anything you'd like to do this weekend?" he asked. "Maybe go for a drive, head down to the lake." Linda didn't even look up. She just shrugged and said, "Whatever you want," then went back to her plate. No smile, no tone, just autopilot. And in that moment, Frank felt something inside him deflate. She didn't reject him. She didn't argue. She didn't push him away. She just didn't care. Not in a cruel way, in a quiet, distant way. The kind that makes a man feel small. He sat there a little longer than usual after dinner, listened to the dishwasher hum, watched her go into the living room without glancing back. No goodbye. No thanks for dinner. Just a woman walking through a house she used to fill with warmth. And that's when it hit him. Not as a thought, not as a sentence, as a feeling, a sinking, unmistakable truth he hadn't wanted to admit for years. I used to be the fire. Now I'm just warm lighting in the corner. That one sentence echoed in his chest for weeks. Frank tried to ignore it at first, tried to focus on the good. They still shared meals, still talked logistics, still went to bed at the same time. But everything had become flat, functional, comfortable, and utterly lacking in spark. He looked back at old photos one night. Linda in her 20s, laughing with her head thrown back, her eyes locked on his, like he was the only man in the world. He remembered the way she used to touch his arm during parties, how she'd rest her head on his chest when they sat on the porch, the way she used to say, "Let's go somewhere," and he'd just grab the keys without asking where. There was a rhythm to them, a fire. And now everything felt beige, predictable, safe, silent. Frank realized he hadn't heard Linda laugh in months. He hadn't seen her eyes widen with surprise in years. And it wasn't because they were older. It wasn't because life slowed down. It was because he had stopped showing up with energy, with edge, with presence. He had become the man who asked, "What do you want to do?" Instead of saying, "Let's go do this." He had softened, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of rocking the boat. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough anymore. So he played it safe, day after day, meal after meal, gesture after gesture, quietly hoping Linda would turn back toward him. But she didn't, because what he didn't realize was this: women don't turn toward safety. They turn toward presence, toward weight, toward the kind of man who doesn't disappear, even when things get quiet. And Frank? He hadn't left her, but he had left himself, and Linda could feel that. In the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he waited for her to lead everything. That night, lying beside her in bed, Frank stared at the ceiling and whispered to himself, "I don't know when I stopped being the man she looked at like that, but I know I want to find him again." And just like that, the first spark returned, not in her eyes, not yet, but in his. Frank thought it was about getting older, about the wrinkles, the gray hair, the slowing metabolism. He thought maybe Linda didn't feel desire anymore because that part of life was just over. But he was wrong. It wasn't about looks. It wasn't about age. It wasn't even about sex. It was about presence. Frank hadn't grown less attractive. He'd grown less present. See, in the beginning, men show up with weight. They lead with direction, not dominance, but clarity. When Frank and Linda first started dating, he didn't ask, "What do you want to do?" He said, "Be ready at 7. I'm taking you somewhere you'll love." He didn't try to be perfect. He was playful, teased her gently, kissed her before she saw it coming. He took initiative, made a decision, led the rhythm between them. That was the fire she leaned into. And Frank wasn't unique. That's how most relationships start. In the beginning, the masculine leads, not with force, but with grounded energy, with presence. It creates polarity, a magnetic pull that makes the woman soften not out of submission, but out of trust. But slowly, over the years, many men trade that presence for peace, for convenience, for agreement. They stop teasing, they stop planning, they stop leading, and they become what Frank became: helpful, nice, pleasant, and completely invisible. Not to the world, but to her. That's the part most men never understand. Attraction doesn't it drifts when polarity disappears. When a man gives up the role of leading emotionally, when he starts tiptoeing around her mood, always asking, "What do you want to do? Is this okay? Whatever works for you," he slowly dissolves in her eyes. He becomes safe, predictable, manageable, and there's nothing magnetic about manageable. Now let's be clear, the problem isn't kindness. Kindness is beautiful, needed, essential, but kindness without clarity, kindness without direction, that's just appeasement. It doesn't feel masculine. It feels like someone trying not to rock the boat. And no woman ever leaned in with desire. To the man who's afraid to make a wave, Frank didn't do anything wrong. He just faded himself out of the dynamic. He softened his edges, hoping that would make things more peaceful. He dimmed his voice, thinking it would make her feel more heard. He let her lead everything, hoping she'd feel more free. But all it did was remove the contrast that made their love come alive. Because Linda didn't stop loving Frank. She stopped feeling Frank. She stopped feeling the edge, the gravity, the masculine presence that once gave her space to relax, to respond, to feel like a woman. And here's the hardest part. She probably couldn't even explain what went wrong. Most women can't. Because it's not conscious. It's not logical. It's emotional. All she knows is something shifted. Something feels flat. She doesn't look at him the same way. Doesn't long for his touch. Doesn't feel pulled toward him anymore. And he, the good man, the loyal husband, sits there confused, thinking maybe she's ungrateful. Maybe she's cold. Maybe he's broken. But no. He just forgot the truth that no one ever taught him. Presence isn't loud. It isn't controlling. It isn't aggressive. It's steady. It's intentional. It leads not with power but with clarity. And when that presence fades, so does her desire. So do her eyes. So does the magnetic pulse between them. And that's how good men, loyal, kind, dependable men, become invisible in their own homes. Frank didn't wake up one day and decide to become a new man. There was no dramatic speech, no self-help seminar, no grand confrontation with Linda. Just a quiet decision, a decision to stop fading. It started small. The following Saturday, instead of asking, "What do you want to do this weekend?" Frank walked into the kitchen, keys in hand, and said, "Let's take the long road up to the lake. I packed us lunch." He didn't ask for approval. He just led. Linda blinked, surprised. She nodded, slowly, and followed him to the car. That was the first step. Then came the clothes. Frank put away the old sweatpants he'd lived in since retirement. Started wearing his old jeans again, the ones that fit just right. Button-down shirts, a belt, real shoes. Not to impress, but to remind himself he still mattered. He trimmed his beard. Got a real haircut instead of just a clean-up. Not for her, for him. Then he went back to the garage. Dusted off the old toolbox. Started rebuilding the '68 Mustang he'd let sit for years. Reclaimed the workbench like it was sacred ground. He wasn't chasing purpose. He was returning to it. The man he used to be? He'd never left. He'd just gone quiet. But now, Frank was moving again. Not frantically. Not desperately. Calm, steady, present. And Linda noticed. She didn't say much at first. Just looked at him a little longer when he walked by. One morning, as he poured his coffee, she said, "Nice haircut. Ins?" Later that week, she asked, "So, where are we going this weekend?" Not, "What do you want to do?" Not, "Whatever you want." She was asking to be led. Something had shifted. Not because Frank tried to win her back. Not because he begged for affection. Not because he changed who he was. But because he returned to who he was. A man with weight. A man with direction. A man with edges soft where they mattered. Firm where they counted. He stopped floating through the days. Stopped outsourcing emotional leadership. Stopped making himself smaller to keep the peace. And without saying a word, he became visible again. Not by demanding attention, but by reclaiming presence. Because women don't want perfect. They want real, rooted, alive. Frank didn't chase her. He stood up, and when he did, Linda turned. Not because he changed, but because she felt him again. If you're sitting there waiting for her to tell you what to do, you've already stepped out of the role she was drawn to. You're not broken. You're not too old. You didn't lose your spark. You just handed it over, little by little, to keep the peace, to avoid mistakes, to stay safe. And I get it. You thought being agreeable would make things smoother. You thought being helpful would keep her happy. You thought that shrinking yourself just a little would make the marriage stronger. But instead, it made you disappear. You stopped leading, stopped deciding, stopped showing up with clarity. And she felt it. Because women don't respond to noise. They respond to presence. And presence isn't controlling. It isn't loud. It isn't forceful. Presence is calm, grounded, clear. It's the energy that says, "I know who I am. I know where I'm going. And you're safe to come with me or not. But I'm moving." That's what she fell for. Not the guy who asks 5 times what she wants for dinner. Not the man who tiptoes around her every emotion. Not the soft echo of a man who used to lead with quiet strength. She didn't change. You dimmed your light. She didn't stop loving you. She stopped feeling you. That fire she used to lean into? It's still there. But it needs oxygen, not apology. And here's the good news. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to perform. You don't need to chase. You just need to remember who you were, when she couldn't take her eyes off you, and then choose to be that man again. Not for her, for you. Because the truth is, you didn't lose it. You just forgot how to hold it. And now, it's time to take it back. Quietly, steadily, powerfully. You didn't lose your spark. You just forgot how to stand in it. And now, it's time to take it back. Quietly, clearly, without apology. Start small. Pick one day this week. Plan it. Lead it. Don't ask for permission, just move. Whether it's cooking her dinner your way, dusting off that old guitar, or just walking with purpose again. Let her feel you. Let yourself feel you. Because presence isn't about being loud, it's about being there. Fully. If this story hit you where it hurts, you're not alone. Tell me, what moment made you realize you'd started to disappear? Drop it in the comments. Or tag a brother who needs to hear this. Let's remind each other. We're still here. And it's not too late to be felt again.